Hey everyone, and welcome to r/LetsNotMeet, the place where we get to see only true stories about people that you never want to meet again. Now, I've done this sub a few times before, and these stories can be absolutely awesome. Today's are no exception, so let's get straight into this first one by user/Sweaty Evie. After high school many years ago, I was in a bad place. My guardian had kicked me out after graduation. She didn't help me find a place to stay, so I lived in my car for a couple of months. I met some heavy metal dudes at work one day. I'd seen them around town before, and all my other friends knew who they were. Everyone loved them. We became friends over a couple of months, and they offered for me to move in with them. I agreed. Looking back now, I wish I'd just stayed in my car. My two main roommates were brothers, named Andrew and Seth. They were in a band. They also believed in the occult and anything of that sort. I never really believed in that stuff, but I'm not one to tell someone what they should believe. They'd let me live with them rent-free for several months, so who was I to complain? Being the only female in a house full of young men, I was always looking over my shoulder. You never know who you can trust. Turns out, I was right to worry. Over time, their friends started to stay with us for longer periods of time, sometimes weeks. Their friends were another group of brothers that they had gone to school with. There were 5 brothers in total, but only 2 stayed with us consistently. The younger brother, Mark, was very polite. He cleaned up after himself and always helped with the household chores. The other brother, Adam, had a laundry list of mental problems. He'd apparently done some bad drugs back in the day, and it had developed into what seemed like psychosis of the religious sort. He'd done time in prison for assaulting a woman with a Bible. He would often look you in the eyes and tell you he could see how you would die. Once, he told me that I was possessed by a demon and I needed my soul cleansed. Everyone in the house knew he had these problems, but he was their friend. They helped him through the hard times and gave him a place to stay. Otherwise, he'd be on the streets. I was always on the guard around him after the things he told me. No one else seemed to be as concerned as I was. They should have been. One day, I was sleeping and my phone rang. It was my boss. He asked me if I could come to work an hour early. It was only 12 PM, I was broke and had nothing better to do. So, I said yes. I got up and began getting ready to leave. I walked into the living room to see Mark and Andrew sitting on the couch, while Adam sat on the floor by the TV. He was watching scripture videos on YouTube. Some real end-of-days stuff. That was fairly common, so I went about my business. I said goodbye and left for work. My shift at work was almost complete when the phone rang. My boss answered, handed me the phone, and said, "For you." I was just a cashier, so I assumed it was a friend that couldn't reach me on my phone. I answered the phone and heard a man's voice that I didn't recognize. "Hi, this is Detective Williams. Something happened at your apartment today, and we need you to come to the station to talk about it." I left work immediately. I'd assumed one of the brothers had been arrested for drug dealing or something. I was very wrong. I got to the station and was buzzed in. An officer escorted me to a small cold room with cameras. He gave me a bottle of water and left me by myself for about 30 minutes. My mind was racing, thinking about what could have happened. He came back in and informed me that Adam had stabbed and killed Andrew at around 1 PM. I was shocked. I just left the house an hour before it happened, and everything seemed fine. I asked if there had been a fight. The detective informed me that there hadn't been a fight, and it seems to have happened out of nowhere. I gave my statement to the police and left with nowhere to go, still in shock and confused out of my mind. Our apartment was a crime scene, so I went to another friend's house to watch the news report, since the police wouldn't give me any information on the case. Over the next couple of days, the information began to be released. Adam hadn't just stabbed Andrew once, not twice, but he'd stabbed him over and over and nearly decapitated him. After the murder, he ran down the road, still holding the murder weapon. He called 911 and informed them what he had done. I watched the news report in horror. We'd known he was unstable, but this? He'd fully confessed to the brutal murder and provided police with his notebooks. He had apparently been planning to murder all of his brothers, my roommates, and me. He thought we were possessed by demons, and this was the only way to free us. Luckily, none of his other intended victims were there that day. Mark unfortunately witnessed the murder, but he luckily escaped. If I hadn't gotten that call from my boss, I wouldn't be alive today. So to the man who brutally murdered my friend and wanted to murder me, let's never meet again. Damn, this is one of those that just sends chills down my spine. You could have been right there, OP. Right there to witness the murder, or possibly get murdered yourself. That would have been, horrifying. Just knowing that happened in your house is just as horrifying, but still. I mean, with some people, I guess you never know. They seem a bit off, they seem a bit crazy, bit weird, but I feel like you can never predict something like this. And here's our next post by user/DK325. Due to a multitude of factors, including a recent death of a close friend, I was unbearably depressed at this time of my life. For that reason, my family flew across the country to visit me in LA, where I live. We thought it would be nice to visit Catalina Island. When we arrived, it became apparent to us that it was off-season. It was late November, the weather was cold, and as a result, the island was nearly empty, besides locals and a few straggling tourists such as ourselves. Our first priority was to ditch our luggage so we could explore the island. So, we immediately checked into our motel, though that word hardly does the place justice. I call it a motel because all the doors to the rooms exited to the outside. But, in actuality, our room was one of 20 or 30 quaint guest-looking buildings, arranged in a sort of horseshoe shape around a walkway, with rooms on either side of the path. The entrance to the motel was essentially one of the points of the horseshoe, and if you walked dead straight, you'd reach the room we were given. Essentially on the corner, before you have to go right to go further into the horseshoe. So, from our room, one path led back to the street, the other further into the secluded maze of rooms. Stay with me. After a couple of days of exploring, and having just finished dinner, it was time for the cold, dark walk back to the room. Catalina Island is a decent distance from the mainland, and let me just say, it gets dark. Similarly dark was my headspace after the dinner conversation took a left turn, and my overwhelming depression got the best of me. I pulled my black hoodie tighter over my freezing ears and walked ahead of my parents to the hotel room, telling them I just needed to go to sleep. And I did immediately. Depression sometimes makes that easy. I was already losing consciousness as they entered after me, drifting off without so much as a good night. I then woke up to my mum saying my name. The room has 2 beds, my parents' bed closer to the door, and mine further in the room. My mum's voice cut through the silence again. She sounded concerned for me. I didn't blame her, considering my mental state at the time. Groggy, I rolled over. What? I asked. As my eyes adjusted to the dim moonlight coming through the curtains, I saw her turn to face me. She was surprised to see me in bed. Her eyes got wide. If I'm in my bed, who was she talking to? We both looked back to where she was previously looking, to see a hooded figure in all black standing over their bed. I know this is Let's Not Meet, and you're reading this knowing a creepy thing is going to happen. It's in the title. But understand how horrifically startling it is to be on an island in the middle of the ocean, and wake up to see a hooded stranger looming over you. This moment seemed to last forever. Life isn't like the movies, where characters unleash a blood-curdling scream. Sometimes, the only thing that comes out is something panicked and guttural. My mum's words became low and severe as she said my dad's name in a dire voice I've never heard her use before. Then, the hooded figure did something so bizarre and unsettling, it didn't even advance towards us, but instead crouched in the corner near where it stood. The way it crouched was so absolutely unexpected, even in regards to this already unexpected situation, that it terrified me. It seemed animalistic. I knew 2 things. The hooded figure had been standing over us sleeping, and it's not acting in any sort of way I can understand. As opposed to the infinite moment of this figure standing over us mere seconds ago, the series of events that unfolded when my hulking, ex-military dad woke up happened in an instant. Suddenly, we were out the door, not knowing which way the intruder went. My mum was screaming, "Get him! Get him!" My dad was running down one path of the horseshoe, further into the hotel, shouting through sheer adrenaline, "I'm gonna effing kill you!" I ran down the other path towards the street. When I got there, not a sign of the intruder. But it became suspiciously quiet behind me. I ran back to the room to find my dad quietly walking back, his head low. He gets really close to me, and I hear him say, "It's an effing kid." The explanation, some young teen, tall and lanky as I am and in their 20s, wearing all black, including a black hoodie, went into the wrong room. Our room. The one time my parents just so happened to forget to lock the door. My mum woke up when he entered, and seeing a tall person in a black hoodie, thought he was me, assumedly leaving the room in a depressive episode. And when the hooded figure crouched, that was him realizing his mistake and panicking. He was scared of us. As I got back to my room, my mum walked out and hugs this kid, who's now crying his eyes out. I would be too if a massive ex-soldier was sprinting after me with murder in his eyes. So, to the now traumatized kid from Catalina Island, I look forward to reading your Let's Not Meet of this same event from your perspective. Yeah, it's one of those ones. Sometimes I like to keep this sub-serious, sometimes I like to take it a bit lighter. Come on, this was an honest mistake. It's an unknown place, no one knows it, and this kid just walked into the wrong room. Honestly, I feel like this would have been terrifying for everyone. And here's the next post by user/TrailyND62. This took place in San Francisco in the early 90s. I was a 33-year-old female living alone in San Francisco. I had a good job and I was very interested in real estate. I decided to walk to a neighborhood grocery store to pick up a real estate magazine. That's what you did back then. We didn't really have the internet yet. It was a rare, warm evening in San Fran, and there were quite a few people walking around outside. I was walking behind a group of about 5 or 6 apparently unrelated people. At least, they weren't talking to each other, so that is what I assumed. I'm rather short, so all I could see was their backs. Suddenly, without a single word from any of them, they all turned around and started walking back in the same direction we'd just come from. I was a bit amazed by this, and turned to look at them. Sort of shrugged it off, and kept going in my original direction. As I turned my head, I was stunned to see a man just in front of me, pointing a gun at me, grinning like a madman. He was about my height, wearing those green mechanics overalls, covered head to toe in grease and dirt. Startled, I was about 2 feet from him, and my gut reaction was just to continue going forward. So I passed him, every muscle in my body tense, heart racing, and kept walking. To my dismay, I heard his footsteps following me. Then he started whispering, "Oh, you're a bad bee, huh? Why don't you run, bee? Run!" At that moment, my mind seized on the belief that he was waiting for me to run before he shot me in the back. He seemed to want it so badly. So I was determined to do the opposite. I kept walking, expecting to feel a bullet slam into my spine at any moment. That shot didn't come, and I believed then and now that if I had run, that would have given him the piece of fantasy that he needed. Anyway, I headed up a hill and around a corner to a gas station with people in it. It was dark already. When I turned around, he was gone. Yeah, wow, this one is quite a crazy one. I'm curious if you had run, if he would have shot you in the back, or if maybe, what I hope it was some really weird prank thing which they orchestrated just to scare some people. I mean, it's still not good, but better than the alternative. Because, I mean, that takes some coordination. That was definitely planned. Good thing you're okay, OP. And guys, I think this post will be the last one for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel for Reddit videos 3 times every single week. But with that said, that is it from me. I hope you all enjoyed, and all I want to do is see you all here next time. See you later, guys.